What's up, everyone? It's Doug the Dog Guy here with one of my favorite people, Michelle Kline from Dog Co Launch. Good morning, Michelle. How are you?
Good morning, Doug. Thanks for having me. I'm great. So happy to be here anytime we get to collaborate together.
Yes, I always love getting to connect with you. And I recently listened to your newest podcast episode where you talked about the levels and the phases of growing your pet care business. I thought this was such an interesting topic. And if anybody has not listened to this podcast episode yet, where can they find it?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Dogco Secrets, Dogco Secrets, and you can listen to it on Spotify, pretty much anywhere, Audible, Apple, YouTube. And the specific episode that we're talking about is called The Scaling Phases of Your Pet Care Business.
Yeah, it was so good. It was so good. And it's something that I think about a lot as somebody that started my business with no business experience. And I had to learn everything the hard way with getting my very first clients and learning how to present my services and set the stage for my business. And then having grown it from there to, multiple six figures, 30 plus employees over the last 11 years. I've really gotten to see and experience these different levels of growing your small business firsthand. And then also as a coach. And I know like this is something that like I work with smaller businesses that are getting started, going up to their very first employees, and then they generally move on to the Dog Co Mastermind with you, and you help get them, to really high levels and do incredible things. So I think since we both built our own pet care businesses and we both have seen it from that side and the coaching and consulting side, I thought we would just have a conversation about these different levels of business and just share our general thoughts here. And hopefully, throughout our conversation, we can pull out a couple of key metrics and KPIs that everyone watching at home can really implement this on their own business and see if they're meeting the averages and see if their business is quote unquote successful or not. Just kind of start with telling us your start with telling us a little bit about your experience. If people don't know who you are, I tell us about you growing your own business and then transitioning into coaching, and then how your mindset has kind of changed and shifted around these different levels.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm Michelle, as Doug said. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm the founder of Dog Co Launch, where my focus is helping team-based businesses in the pet care industry grow and scale. It's what I love to do. It's what I spend all my time doing. And so I had an in-home pet care business that I started in 2017, scaled it up really quickly through the pandemic. At first, we were full service pet care, then we went dog walking only. Got up to 25 staff, 600 active clients, and realized that I just felt there was room in the industry for someone that was really focused on like businesses that wanted to scale. My specific expertise was in dog walking, so I've done a lot of work with that specific revenue line. But at the heart of it, as I've been in this work for maybe 3 years now, the heart of that for me is what does it take to scale your pet care company? What does it take to go from where you are today to the next level? And when you have the engine of a team built inside of your business, there's so many different ways we can do that. So I sold my business in 2023 so that I could launch Dog Co Launch and have now this going on my third year of doing this full time. So and I'm just going to kind of throw out like where the phases came to me from, and kind of what shaped that specific podcast and informed our conversation today. So I don't know if you experienced this in your pet care business, but when I was growing mine, and I think especially when you have a business growing that quickly, it felt a lot like shooting in the dark. It's like I think this is right. I don't really have a community. I didn't know any other pet care business owners that were doing what I was doing. Part of that is on me. I didn't go looking for them, but I didn't know. I didn't have any type of like North Star to head after, which I think is one of the most interesting things about being in the industry as it is now. Is so much more of that is shaping up and like pathways for people and, just more of a vision of what they can do.
I
So
definitely
yeah,
experienced that, especially 11
did
years
you?
ago when I started. I felt like I was trying to create the wheel like as I went, and
Right?
I know a
Yeah.
lot of people watching at home can attest to that too.
It it's so funny because I look back on the first like 10 years of entrepreneurship for me, and the best way to categorize it is running at a wall as hard as you can over and over again until you either finally break through it or you just realize I have to run against a different wall. And that's been the
I,
first
I
decade.
I'm imagining you like in the Kool-Aid man suit, like
That's pretty much what it's been, or what it historically has been. And so when I got into Dog Co, one of the really cool things about so I've worked with about 200 companies now across the industry in the last 3 years. Little bit of solo, but most of the time you work with solo and then we connect after. So little bit of solo, but mostly team-based companies, really anywhere from, I'd say over 100,000 usually, up to seven-figure plus. Um, right now, my client base is kind of about 60% in that 200 to 500,000. And then about 40% kind of past that. 25% of my clients are what I would consider ascending to seven figure or above. And one of the really cool things I've noticed is that, when I just had my experience coming into Dogco, I knew what the faces looked like in my business. I knew that 0 to 100K had these problems in it, and 100K to 300K had these problems, and 300 to 400, and, just kind of like these different levels. But as I've worked with so many clients, I've gotten to see themes that are really repeatable across revenue levels and company sizes, to a degree of predictability. And that really got my mind going on, I wonder if breaking this down of at least what I see in my seat in the industry could help other people find a pathway forward.
Yeah, yeah. That's something that I've seen also that, I've gone through this stuff firsthand. And then as I've coached and worked with and just networked with other business owners, it's been really amazing to see that we are really going through a lot of the same things at the same spots in our business. And I think it's easy to kind of feel like we're all alone and that we're the only ones going through these different issues and challenges at each different level of our business. But it's been very heartwarming, honestly, to realize that we're not alone. We are experiencing a lot of the same things. And that was one of the things that really stood out when I listened to your podcast talking about this. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is it was like a light bulb listening to you speak, thinking, wow, we really are all in this together. We have so much to learn from each other. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. The community, this, but the community aspect of Dogco is one of my favorite pieces of it.
It is
Um,
my favorite piece. I mean, I'm just out of full transparency for everybody listening. I am enrolled in the Dogco Mastermind, and I love it. And the community aspect is my favorite part. I've done lots of different coaching programs over the years, and I've never been a part of a community that just felt so warm and inviting and supportive. And it's like I can come to office hours or go into the Facebook group or just text you directly, with whatever it is that I'm going through. And it's like all of a sudden I have support. It's amazing.
well, I'm glad to hear that because I love everything about it. So that's good.
But anyway, let's talk about this first phase that people go through. they've decided that they're going to be a pet sitter and dog walker. They're still at their, their normal 9 to 5 job. They're getting their business started, getting their first clients. What does this first phase really look like to you?
Yeah. Um, so the way I'd categorize that, most people who fit that phase tend to be solopreneurs. So they tend to be, I see an opportunity. I would say, from my experience at least, most people who come into this industry saw an opportunity as an animal lover to work for themselves more so than, ooh, I bet I could scale this up to 60, 70 people in the next decade and be running 2 to 3 mil. And, some people approach it that way, but many people in our industry, my neighbor offered to pay me and then I did it and I loved it and realized like, I can work with a lot of different people. That was at least my start in the industry. So I would say the most important piece from my perspective, and I'd really love yours on this avatar because I know you work with a lot of solo or people who are just starting to transition into more of the team building, business building, is like my recommendation is get full time as quickly as you can first, and then let's just get all the cards on the table and figure out the next pathway forward. I think the solo to team transition tends to be more variable just because there are a lot of individual considerations you have to take in place in order to make that transition. Like going from 10 to 15 team members, that's a little more playbook. It's like, okay, we need to add in this revenue. We need to know your hiring and training costs. We need to have somebody managing your hiring pipeline. But transition to team, it's like, well, how much do you have to have in personal pay? Like what services are you looking to scale? How are we hiring for that? So there's a little bit more of this kind of strategic like transition that I think can feel a little foreboding to people. One of the things I highlighted in the podcast that if you are solo looking to transition to a team will expedite significantly this process for you is I have worked with and seen a lot of solos who basically treat themselves as the full service provider. And then they hire for the overflow. And if you can flip flop that and instead like continue to like basically fire yourself and continue to elevate yourself, that sets you on a really good trajectory forward. But it also lets you kick off your staffing with a lot of consistency and predictability because basically you structure at the core of the business. You go ahead and like move yourself to the owner and start putting the service provision with staff. And I have found that short term that's painful because you lose a lot of like your personal take home pay. It just is what it is. But long term, it sets you up to actually accelerate and grow really quickly.
Yeah, I agree. It does set you up to be able to grow quicker, but I do think it is really, really difficult. If you're a solo
Hmm.
pet sitter, you have a full roster yourself, and then all of a sudden you give the majority of those clients to your first couple of hires, you have lost out on a lot of your personal income. And if you don't have a good savings account that you can rely on or another source of income, that's going to be challenging. Do you have any pieces of advice for people to kind of get over that hump?
Yeah, so I think the first is to have a really realistic understanding of a healthy margin with your team taking services instead of you. Now, this is going to vary across the industry for sure. But an owner that is fully out of the field, that is just profiting from other people providing services, typically 20 to 30% is going to be seen as healthy in our industry. Now, if you're earlier on, you may not have a ton of expenses yet, and so you may be able to be in the 30 to 40, maybe 45% profit margin if we're really thoughtful about that transition. But as the service provider yourself, you're probably netting 90 to 92%, maybe 95 off of the services you provide. So first things first is I think really understanding kind of the trade of the math because I have worked with people who are like, you know what, I'm burnt out. I need the help. I know this is the next step. They bring somebody in. If we've done it that way, there's a good chance we're overpaying on labor. So it's already compressing that margin pretty. I mean, I brought in my first IC because I didn't know what I was doing at 80%. So that can tell you where I started.
We went down the same path there, and we both learned the hard way.
Yes, please use our wisdom to avoid so many painful mistakes that Doug and I both made.
Yes.
um, yeah, so I think really understanding the math and what the trade of that math is, taking time to invest in things like your hiring course, which, by the way, just so everybody knows, I would plug that whether or not I was sitting face to face with Doug because it's a phenomenal resource. And
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. I mean that very deeply. Their hiring is awesome in your pet care business. I would not trade that for the world. I would have slowed down a little bit at the beginning to invest in resources that help me set it up better from the get-go. Specifically on the financial numbers, and your course does that. Like, what can I afford to pay? What should I pay? Because there's a lot of needless guesswork, I think, there for a lot of people.
Thank you. Thank you. I had no idea what I was doing when I transitioned from solo to making my first hires. I had never hired anyone before. I had never managed anyone. So I made every mistake in the book. My labor margins were so out of whack the first few years. And that's why I put together the course is like, I don't want people to go through the same heartache that I had to go through.
Hmm.
Um, when let me ask, do you think that it's the right decision for all solo pet sitters to eventually hire, or do you think is there a spot to where they get that they're thinking about hiring and then they say maybe they should stay solo? What are your thoughts on that? And when is that spot typically for as far as revenue goes?
Yeah. So I want to preface to everyone there is so much nuance here. And the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is that it looks the way you want it to. And at the
Yes.
end of the day, that is the only thing that I have like a deep, rock solid, forever belief of like non-shakiness. Like that will never change. It's your business. You should build what you want for the lifestyle you want. Now, that being said, I will give you my personal opinion, but I really do believe that, just so everybody knows. Um, so, Doug, I've shared this experience with you. In 2019, I was injured very badly and very unexpectedly. And this business was my and my husband's only revenue. And like to the point where there was a question for a window of time on like, will she be able to walk again? Will she survive? Like it was a very bad injury. And in that moment, it did crystallize for me that if we are looking at risk reward in a business that you have tied your permanent livelihood for as your career, I do think it needs to be a strong consideration that you hire. Um, Now, if this is something you genuinely enjoy and you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this for a decade or 15 years even, and I'm going to gain skills, and maybe this isn't my forever business, but it's something I enjoy and I want to learn, or maybe I just want to work for myself while I explore other things. I'm not saying there's not any nuance to this. Um, but if this is like, man, this is my bread and butter and this is me forever, I gotta say I'm on the team train.
Yeah, yeah. Where do you think most people are making this decision on whether to stay solo or hire their first person as far as revenue?
Yeah, so I talked about this a bit in the podcast. This is where I think there's a lot of variability, specifically at the solo level, because I've worked with people who started hiring at like I did 10 grand last year and then I brought somebody on. I've had people that have waited until they were doing like 120 a year. Um, and then we're bringing people on. I would say the majority of businesses I work with probably are somewhere in or the majority of businesses I've seen since I don't work with as many solo providers. Typically you're in the 35 to 45K a year where it's like there's enough I've been able to do this full time. I've validated this is growing and I'm starting to see demand come in that I can't meet. Whether that's like just like a duplication of services, like because I can't clone myself, I can't do multiple overnights at one time, as an example. Um, or, maybe I'm just getting kind of physically burnt out or physically tired. But I would say most often probably in that 35 to 45K. But I'd be curious what you've seen on your end.
Yeah, I actually made a little outline of some of my thoughts on the different levels before we
Hmm.
got on the call today. And I put my first phase as the getting started phase. You're solo, you're transitioning out of your normal job, figuring out how to present yourself to the community, sorting out your service structure, your prices, and then up to the point where you think about making your first hire. And I put that's 0 to 35,000 in revenue. So we're thinking right
Yeah.
along the same lines here.
Um, you know, there 35,000 actually was the line for me where I was like, man, that's a lot of fluff and dog walks. Like I was like, okay, I'm projecting this out and I don't know that I personally want to do more than this. That was just me. But
Yep.
yeah.
I made my first hire when I was 11 months into the business and I was a full-time college student. So I was taking classes and I was still working at Target too. So I was taking full-time classes, I was working 20 hours a week at Target plus trying to build this base of my pet sitting and dog walking business. And that's where I hit the wall between the classes, Target, and then I hit 30,000 in revenue with my pet sitting business. And I said, I physically, mentally, and emotionally can do no more. I have to have help.
So can I tell you, Doug, this is wild to me because we've known each other for years now. That was the exact same for me. I was in, and which I know we've talked about the higher education piece, but I was in a like degree program and I was getting my graduate degree and I was doing that like 20, 30 hours a week and I had started this business. And then at 8 months in, we had hit 35 the year before and we were just kind of like progressively building. And I was like, I got to get people in. So at 8 months, I started bringing people on.
Wow. It's crazy
Yeah,
how similar our timelines have been.
I know. I love it.
Yeah. I'll say, I don't know if this was your experience or not. We're kind of going on a tangent here, but I was so glad that I kept my other source of income through Target as long as I did. I actually
Mm.
continued working another job. I left Target and went to work for U-Haul. I was a hitch pro installing hitches on trucks to pull trailers, if you can imagine me doing that, but I
That's a
loved it.
flex. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I loved it. It was one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. But I did that up until I had 3 employees, and we were doing 6 figures in revenue. And I actually finished my college degree. And I think that was one of the best decisions I made was keeping that other source of income. That way I could really give all of the pet sitting and dog walking jobs to my team and prioritize their schedule and their income in that way without having to worry about it really affecting my take home pay as much. Did you
Yeah.
keep another job during that phase or were you all in? I mean, what did that look like? And what's your thoughts on somebody keeping another source of income that long?
Yeah. 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 Man, I love that we're talking about this because this is so representative of the kind of like square step dance that it is when you're first starting of figuring out how the pieces come together until it gets this acceleration of momentum where it can just sustain you itself. Um, so when I I don't know if we've talked about this. So I was in my second year of graduate school and I had had a part-time job the year before that was fine. Like there was nothing on paper wrong with it. I was making like 15 bucks an hour, which at the time was like more than any part-time job I had ever had.
I was making $10 an hour at U-Haul and I thought I was rich.
You can tell we come from states with minimum wage that's like $7 an hour.
Literally.
Yep. So I was making like 15 bucks an hour, and they had offered me a part-time job for the upcoming year, the upcoming school year. And on paper, it was everything it should have been. They were like, it's 15 bucks an hour. You can make your own schedule. It was like the income level I needed to be part-time graduate while my husband worked full-time. And I will never forget this. I was sitting on the couch in my living room and I was about to hit send on the acceptance of the offer. And I just had this moment where I was like, I don't want to. I just had this like sense of like, this just doesn't bring me any type of meaningful joy. And I picked up my phone and so actually I emailed them and just said, I'm really sorry. I know this is very different than what we've been talking about for months. I mean, I had been very active in helping create this position. Um, I'm going to decline. I'm not coming back. I wish you all well. It's not it's me, it's not you. And I texted my husband and I said, what if I started a dog walking company? And while I was waiting for him to text me back, I went and bought the domain. I went and got the Instagram handle. I texted a local photographer and set up a shoot. I set up I put like money in a separate savings account and he texted me back and I was like, God, I hope this goes well. And he was like, yeah, you should absolutely explore that. And I was like, thank God I already did because I turned down that job. I started this company. So anyways, revenue stream. So back to your original question. The first year of the company, I just had a number I had to hit every week, but because he worked full time was more flexible. And I want to say it was small. It was like $200 to $300 a week. And I was like, I really think I can do that. Just started putting myself out there, etc. The next summer, we had gotten, so we did 35K the first year, which I started August 17th. And so we did 35K that fall, came into the next year, and we were growing really quickly, but I was still in graduate school. That was still my full focus. This was very much part-time side hustle energy for me. And my husband came home from work that summer and he said, I need to leave my job. I'm really unhappy. I can't keep doing this. And I was like, okay, we can figure that out. Like, can you give me 6 months? Like maybe I can get the business to the place where I can treat this more like a full-time thing. And Doug, he looked me in the eye and he said, I have to put in notice tomorrow. I will not continue to like survive being here.
Wow.
And then the business became everything.
Wow. That makes it real very fast.
It did. And it was awesome because I think it kind of hit this perfect combination of like the first year, I had the flexibility if this isn't do or die, I can kind of like build this right. And then there was a flip of the switch and it was like, you know what? There is no other option other than success. And I really believe humans are capable of a lot of incredible things when there just is not the option to fail.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I was in a very similar spot when I was fired from Target. I was never good at working for other people. I think I was born to be my own boss. And before
Except
I
U-Haul.
landed,
We really thrived there.
right.
Yeah.
There was a period like where I had been fired from Target and I hadn't landed the U-Haul job yet. And it was several weeks where I had to get enough pet sitting and dog walking clients fast enough to be able to pay my bill, to keep the electricity on in my apartment. And I think at the time it was so stressful, but looking back on it, I'm so glad that I had something happen in life that put me up against that wall that
Mm,
forced me to make the business successful. I feel like if I hadn't have been put in that position, I probably would have never hustled as hard as I did to land those initial clients and figure out those first things in that first phase of the business.
yep. Yep. 100%.
Once again, just interesting that we had similar types of things happen.
I love it. I'm
Yeah.
unsurprised, but I love it.
So like this first phase, we're like really just we're building a job for ourselves. And that's how I think of it is we're creating a job. We're not really creating like a business yet. But then once we get up to this, 30, 40,000 in revenue, our personal roster is getting pretty full. We're starting to take this more seriously and realize that it can be things. That really is when we start to transition into this next level, this next phase of business where we're not just creating a job for ourselves, but we're stepping more into the role of an actual business owner, and
Hmm.
really starting to cross our T's, dot our I's, and make those first hires. Would you
Hmm.
kind of agree with that? And what do you think of when you think of that next level of business?
Yeah, so from a revenue standpoint, I've always personally categorized that at about $100,000 because up until then, even if you have staff, most likely, not always, but most likely for just you still being able to make ends meet yourself, you're probably still in the field a good bit. Probably kind of like if you have started hiring, just straddling that line between this is a job where I'm like in it and I'm an owner where I'm facilitating it. At about 100,000, I see, and specifically between 100,000 to 200,000, at least my experience, there's this transition that has to happen in the relationship of the business for you to keep growing, and you have to start pulling yourself out of the field. Up until then, you can kind of dance around doing all of it. I'm not saying it's fun, but you can. And then I found you reach a tipping point typically in that revenue level. Some people, it's further down, but typically in that revenue level where even if you're not out of the field, you start to really see why you should be. Um, and I think that's a really pivotal moment because that's where you have the opportunity to really transition into more of that owner role. And it's really hard.
That is a very hard phase. That's a very
Yeah.
hard phase. You're making lots of big decisions every day. And I think I can speak personally, I definitely just felt like I was walking around with like decision fatigue all
Yes.
day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and one thing that really stood out to me in that phase was I started to develop this really critical awareness of the volume and the implications on safety. And started realizing like, man, there are some areas of my business I've been pretty fly by the seat of my pants. And at this size, I really can't be. Like we did $156,000 our second year in revenue, like our first, wait, yes, no, yes, sorry. We did 156,000 our first full year in business. And by the end of that year, I was like, man, when you personally are really close to every pet sitting job, you can kind of come behind people and just pick up stuff that got dropped. But when you get to that volume, it I just had this it's like I came into consciousness one day and I was like, "Whoa, this could go really badly if I personally like have a day where I'm not on it." And that feels like way too much to just be centered around me.
Yeah, yeah. I had a very similar kind of wake up call about the same revenue point. I think I was maybe 2.5 years into business. But my wake up call was more on the administrative side than the services
Mm,
side. I woke
mm-hmm.
up one day and I realized I'm good at playing with the dogs. I'm good at caring for the cats and being out there in the field, and that's what I enjoy. And I realized that everything that gave me stress and anxiety and everything where things were starting to fall through the cracks and starting to create problems, and where I started to realize this could be a real shit show if I don't get ahead of it, was on the admin side, because that's not what I enjoyed and not what I was good at. I know you talk a lot about this is where a lot of business owners should get out of the field to focus more on the admin side. I kind of went the exact opposite direction, where I said, okay, this is where I have to hire people that are good at running
Mm.
a business and good at the admin side. That way I can go back to being in the field full time.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, and I think that gets down to like a core principle, Doug, that I think is reflective in every phase, and that is the business just needs what it needs. And that's where I think it's our job as the owner to assess like what does the business need? How can I get the business that thing? And then there's a consideration of is it my skill set? Is it my interest? Is it my passion? And really picking and choosing what do I fire myself from for the
Right.
sake of the business. But the business just needs what it needs if you want it to keep growing. Like that's kind of just its own thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good way to put it. And I think to even realize what the business needs and doesn't need, and to make those decisions, you first have to look inwardly and realize what your own strengths and weaknesses are, and which strengths and weaknesses you're willing to work on, and willing
Mm-hmm.
to improve. For me, I looked at it and said, I'm willing to learn more about animal body language and more about how to protect dogs' paws on hot concrete. I am not willing to learn more about how to, do all these administrative tasks and double check invoices and all that kind of stuff. So I started hiring that
Yeah.
stuff out at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I think it comes down to again in this phase. Um, I know you know this about me, but I'm very big on the metrics and data. And so I think it's just understanding your numbers well enough to know what freedom of decision making do I have when it comes to the resources I put into the business and what are the implications for my personal take home. Um, the number one reason that small businesses fail is cash flow issues. And that's where I, at the end of the day, you can build your business however you want to whatever you want if you know your numbers and if you know the data inside of your business and what you can and can't do depending on this at the size that it's at.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest part about this kind of, let's call it like level 2,
Mm-hmm.
moving into level 3. I think this is where that transition from level 2 to level 3 is where you have to figure out your numbers.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
Where do you suggest people get started with that?
Figuring out your numbers, getting a bookkeeper, to be
Yeah.
totally honest. I think that if we're looking at this through I'm a big fan of the 80/20 principle, where, there's certain things you're going to do for your business that give you a way bigger return than other things. Hiring a bookkeeper who can keep your books up to date, who can help you understand what a profit loss statement is and what you're looking at, that I brought a bookkeeper in a little bit later than this, but I would say I really needed a bookkeeper between like 150 and 200. Um, one of the biggest objections I get from companies about getting a bookkeeper is, well, because I don't know my numbers, I don't know if I can afford to. My loving challenge always is if you don't know, you have to do this because that's the crux of it. And this is just hiring a bookkeeper. This is on the grand scheme of the decisions you're going to make in your business, very small. And so if we don't have enough insight even to know this, we have a really big problem.
I could not agree more. I waited way too long to hire a bookkeeper. I mean, you pushed me to hire a bookkeeper. I ended up hiring your bookkeeper, so it's been amazing. But I wish we would have met earlier in life. That way, you could have pushed me to make that hire like 5 years ago.
The best thing about if we had met earlier, Doug, is I was bumbling. We just would have been bumbling into our own walls, like waving at each other. It wouldn't have been as helpful, I promise.
Yeah, oh, we would have been having fun though.
We would have. We would get a beer and,
Yep.
chew the fat or whatever they say.
Yep, yep. So yeah, we're transitioning out of this kind of level two into level three. We're starting to get a better understanding of our numbers and our metrics. What do some of these key metrics look like? We're kind of at this 200,000 in annual revenue point. What are some of these key metrics and key data points that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah. So when it comes to clarity on the numbers inside of your business from like a defensive posture. There's some offensive here as well, but like from the maths, and we're going to have enough fuel in the engine to keep going. We want to be really clear on labor costs and profit margin. Those are the two that are going to kind of determine the runway and acceleration you're working with. So profit margin, we want to be for sure 20% plus. 20 to 30% is going to be, determined as healthy. I really like to encourage companies to try to get between 25 and 30% at least. I think especially at that 200,000 mark, when we're looking at kind of bumping to the next level, typically, this foreshadowing a bit where we're headed, but between 200 and 300,000 is when I start to see companies really need their first administrative support. They may have brought it in earlier than that, but that we're getting to the volume where it's like becoming a lot for the owner to do all of it. So your profit margin has to be high enough and your labor margin low enough that you have meat on the bone for these administrative hires that tend to be just like pure cost to the business. You may be able to put in some positions that like also do field labor and they do administrative work, but some of the position is going to be just pure cost. So if you can get your labor margin 25% plus, 30% plus, you're going to be in a solid spot.
Your profit
Sorry,
margin?
your profit margin. Thank you. I heard it come out and I was like, wrong. Your profit margin, high. Your labor margin, you want to focus on low. So industry average, it's going to change a little bit depending on who you're talking to. But from what I've seen, 50% tends to be the like kind of tried and true. If you can keep it under that, we're in a better spot. I know some coaches advocate for like sub 45. I do think this is pretty service area dependent. You're just going to have more flexibility in a state like mine. Just to be totally candid, where minimum wage is $7.25, and I don't have to reimburse mileage, and I don't have to provide PTO or sick time. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I don't have to. Versus a state like Illinois, where we're looking at a pretty aggressive minimum wage, full federal mileage reimbursement. I think some of that's area dependent, but 50% tends to be pretty tried and true.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I mean that's what I teach in my hiring course as well. These metrics of like 20-30% profit margin with lower labor cost, these are important at all phases of business.
Yes.
And if you can hone in on these margins and really meet these metrics, in phase one, phase two, when you're at lower revenue points, that's incredible. That should be aimed for. But I think what we're saying here is that when you get to this point of 200 plus thousand in annual revenue, now's the point where you have to get these things in line. You can kind of get away with some wonky numbers when you're below that revenue point. You're still kind of moving some things around. You're probably still in the field some yourself. But when you get to these higher revenue points and you're really out of the field, you have to start treating your business like a well-oiled machine, and you have to make it be a well-oiled machine.
Yep. You know, I hadn't thought about it directly in those terms, Doug, but at about 200,000, I was forced to get my numbers lined up correctly because I just couldn't make investments I needed to make in the business to build it to the next level. You perfectly phrased that. I remember there was a moment that was really eye-opening for me where up until about 200,000, I had been doing what a lot of people do, like using like some like contract type things I'd found online and just kind of like bootstrapping a lot of the like employee offer letter and blah blah blah. And I got a quote from a lawyer to actually do my employment contracts and my offer letter and to review my handbook, which is a really wise investment for a business to
Yes,
make.
yes. A necessary investment, I would say.
Yes, yes, especially when you reach a certain size, because just Murphy's Law, you will end up in a legal entanglement at some point.
Yep.
You just will. You will need a lawyer. You will have done something that you have to figure out. It just, or even not done something, but you will. It's just,
Yeah.
you're
Something will
successful
happen. It's
attracting.
not
Yes.
if, it's when.
Yes. 100%. And I remember he quoted me $1,200 to review all my contracts, to review my handbook, which now I look back and I'm like, that was so reasonable. like
Yeah.
that's a good deal. But at the time I was like, okay, that's going to take me about 4 months to save for. And I just had this moment where I was like, I can't exactly tell you how my numbers are out of alignment, but if we're doing 200,000 a year and I can't afford 1,200 for like a very protective move for the business, we're not in a good spot. So I ended up taking a big step back, redoing the way that all of my labor was set up and just relaunching a new model, new pricing to clients, like a new even service structure tier. Because I was like, this math is not mathing.
Yeah. What revenue point were you at when this kind of came about?
About 200,000, little under, maybe 180.
Yep. I think
But
I was at
yeah,
about the same point. I was closer to 300,000, but there came a point right around there where I realized, okay, I've got to look at everything that I've been doing and rework it. And I did,
yeah,
just like you said, I rolled out some new services, took away some old services, redid our pricing, that's when I transitioned from independent contractors to employees. I
yep.
do recommend starting with employees, not independent contractors for anybody watching at home. But it all came about right at that time point for me too.
Yeah, that's actually when I transitioned as well from ICs to employees.
Wow.
I, when I was kind of in the middle of reconfiguring things, my CPA reached out and she was like, by the way, there's absolutely no way you're running compliantly. So here are the next steps, but you are converting to employees. I was like, great. I had no idea what that meant. I just followed blindly, but it was good wisdom and I'm glad I did.
Yep, yep, yep. It's nice that you had somebody to tell you that then. I was told by the Department of Labor. That was a very different conversation.
My aunt was my CPA, so I think she felt some like very direct liberties.
uh, that's nice. Got to have people watching out for you.
Yeah, true. She would even audit my social media and she'd be like, she'd take screenshots and she would be like, stop using the word hire. You are not, which I think a lot of people don't realize with ICs actually, you're not hiring them. You are contracting them. She was like, you
Right.
have to stop using the word hire. You have to stop using the word staff. None of that is compliant. And I think she just finally got fed up and she was like, you're converting.
So, speaking of kind of being at this point, here's
Mhm.
Athena is joining the call.
Hi, Athena,
So,
by the way.
speaking of being at this point in your business, and needing people to watch out for you and help you sort out through some of these issues, I think this is where a lot of people start to come into your world with Dog Co.
Hmm.
and everything that you do. Um, is that true? Is that where most people kind of come into the Dog Co. mastermind?
So here's what's really interesting about this. I would say historically, Dogco has tended to intersect with people somewhere in the 2 to 350. It's like we don't have a lot of systems and infrastructure. But we have a high enough volume and kind of an acceleration pathway that we want to capitalize on it. The last 7 months, that has shifted a bit. I mentioned before, 25% of my current clients are either at seven figures or ascending to it. Um, TBD, but I do think Dogco intersects with companies when it's like, I feel I've tapped my capacity and I know there is a next step and a next pathway, and I need to see what that is.
Yeah, yeah. That leads me to the conference. You have a
Mm.
conference coming up in Winston-Salem here in September of this year. I'm so excited to get to spend time with you in person, get to meet Joey Coleman. I mean, it's going to be incredible. I think there's going to be a wide variety of businesses there too. I mean, people that are in stage two, stage three, all the way up to these seven-figure businesses. And just the
Mhm.
opportunity to get to come together all under one roof and learn from each other and share stories with each other. I'm stoked. Tell us a little bit about the conference and what we can expect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I wanted to do an in-person conference because I wanted to do exactly what you're talking about. Like companies that are focused on scaling, focused on getting to that next level, which by the way, if you're solo, please still come. I wish I had invested in things like this when I was solo, especially if you're
Yes.
thinking about doing a team or building a team. I will say like 95% of the companies in the room are already team based and already focused on scaling. So, man, if there's a room to get in, if you're solo and that's your trajectory, get in this one. I can already tell you, like, just figure out how to get there.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, and team based as well, I think, because it's gonna be a cool room. There's a lot of talent coming. Um, but yeah, the conference was born just out of a desire to do that and a deep belief that there is power in bringing people together in person. And I think especially in a world that's becoming more and more digital, more and more kind of like light touch when it comes to knowledge and experience, the idea of getting to take 2 days, 2.5 days really, if you come to do the Joey Coleman workshop, which if you're coming all the way to Winston, do the Joey Coleman workshop. Get to know Joey Coleman. He's freaking incredible.
Yes. Yes. If anybody doesn't
Yeah.
know who Joey Coleman is, I mean, give us a little rundown here.
Yeah. So Joey Coleman is the best-selling author of Never Lose a Customer Again and Never Lose a Client Again. Sorry, Never Lose a Customer, Never Lose an Employee. I
Yeah.
do that every time. And he is just a wealth of knowledge. His book is one of the main resources I wish I had known about when I had my business. I discovered it after, and especially, so here's I'll give my 2 second pitch on this, but I'm really impassioned about it. This business model thrives on retention. I think that's how you build a big, beautiful, powerful pet care company is you actually get really good at retaining staff and really good at retaining clients. Even more so than building skills at getting new clients. Now we have to get new clients to have people to even retain, but the value in a new client tends to be 15 to like $200 depending on that first booking. The value in retention in this business model can be 6,000 to 10,000 a year per client if you figure out how to get the right people and how to really keep them and maximize their value. Similar to employee retention, if you have not yet experienced the hamster wheel that is employee retention of just people kind of leaving and you're constantly having to rehire, focusing on retention and keeping the people you want to keep it's critical to enjoying this business, your business growing, succeeding. So I think the work that Joey is doing, it It was an ambitious swing to bring in somebody like him to a first year conference. Like it after I signed the contract, I was like, what have I done?
When you texted me and said you had landed, I was like, "What, dude? Incredible!" Like I was giving you high fives, like
Meanwhile, I
via
didn't sleep
text.
for
Like
2 weeks. I was like, okay, here's how many tickets I have to sell.
his
Um,
book, "Never
yeah.
Lose an Employee Again," was game changing for me. I mean, both of his books were game changing, but "Never Lose an Employee Again." I mean, it's on my bookshelf back here. I've got notes in the margins. It's highlighted, the works. Game changing for me. And
Yeah.
I think, we're talking about these different levels and phases of business. We just kind of talked about this 200 to 300 revenue, 200,000 to 300,000 annual revenue level. Really, to get beyond that level, to all of the levels that come after that, honing in on your staff retention and your client retention is absolutely key to those further steps.
Well, and I've been very honest with my clients. This was my biggest flaw in my business is I was so front end focused on new client acquisition. And I put very little time, effort, and energy into client retention. Staff retention, it just kicked me in the butt so early that I was like, I have to figure this out. So that one I'd gotten a little further on, but I would have had a much, much bigger business if I had cracked that and actually put time and attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us, going back to the conference, I know we're kind of jumping
Yes.
around, but
Oh, I can
uh,
already tell you this is going to have to be a multi-episode topic because
yes,
I'm like, I could
yes.
talk about this for the next 4 hours. Yes.
Agreed. We'll definitely get on another one of these. And again, if anybody watching at home wants some more information, go check out the Dog Co Secrets podcast. I mean, this episode that sparked this conversation was such a great episode, and you had Joey Coleman himself on there just a couple weeks ago. Incredible. Tell us more about the conference, though. It's in Winston-Salem. It's this October. Who else is going to be speaking, and where can we get tickets?
Yes. So we tried to get October. We're actually in September.
My bad.
Um, Doug will be there, regardless of what that just implied. Doug
Yes,
will
it's
be
on
in
my
person.
calendar.
So it's September 26th through the 28th. Right now, we have about 180 companies in the room. We also are selling digital tickets. If you can get there in person, please do. My hope is we have somewhere between 220 and 250. We still have, a few months to sell tickets, so that'd be incredible. Jamie Troll is our keynote. If you were in the industry through the pandemic, you know the godsend lifeline that Jamie was. She is a financial strategist. She has a book coming out in October. I can't give too much away, but you'll find out a lot more about it at the conference.
Exciting.
Yeah, so she'll be there. Robert Strickland, this is his inaugural conference.
Incredible.
Um,
I literally Facebook messaged him just the other day. I was just like thinking about him randomly. I'm like, I'm finally going to get to meet Robert after all these years. I'm going to get to meet him in person. I literally messaged him. I'm like, I'm stoked to meet you.
It I when I decided to do the conference, Robert was one of the first people I messaged, and I was like, Robert, I'm not even going to try and play this cool. There is no negotiating leverage on my end. What will it take to get you here? Like you just tell me because that's the kind of leverage that you have in this moment. I want you here. It's important that you're here. And he was gracious enough to say yes.
Yeah. If anybody watching is like, who is Robert Strickland? He runs the Next Level Pet Businesses Facebook group. I'll put a link to that down in the description below. My three favorite Facebook groups are yours, the Grow My Daily Dog Walking Business with Dog Co launch Facebook group, link down in the description below. Robert's Next Level group, and then Colin and Megan Funkhauser from Pet Sitter Confessional. They have Sitter Confessionals, I think is the name of their group. I
Hmm.
live in those three groups. So, I mean, those are free resources that anybody listening to this at home can go join those groups right now, get access to pet business owners all across the world that, like I said at the beginning, we are all experiencing so much of the same things. And we can and should come together and support each other. And you can start that process right there in these Facebook groups and then continue that process at the Dogco conference.
I'm biased, but that sounds like a phenomenal plan to me. You will be speaking at the conference, which I'm really excited about. And thank you.
Yes. I thank you. Thank you. This will be my first time speaking about YouTube and growing a YouTube audience and how that has impacted my actual pet care business. So I'm really excited to get to talk about that. I mean, if you guys are subscribed to my YouTube channel, which you should be subscribed, it's how passionate I am about this. And something that I have not shared in my YouTube videos is how much making these videos has impacted my actual pet sitting and dog walking business. So I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm going to share the metrics. I'm going to show you guys how this has changed my life. So I'm stoked. Thank you for the opportunity, Michelle.
No, thank you. I work with so many companies, Doug, that have interest in content creation and have interest in how to drive more just like a digital attention to what they're doing, whether it's their pet care business or another. So your willingness to explore this entire world that you've built in your channel, I can't wait. And that is probably one of the things I'm most excited about for the summit. I've kind of built my dream education of just you know what, these are all the things I want to learn about. So I plan to be front row and center for as much as I can. Just if nothing else, I just give it to me. I'm ready.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about all the speakers and all the different sessions. I can say one of the ones I'm looking forward to the most is Dave Peterson is going to be talking about email marketing, building your email list, converting these people to paying clients. I'm obsessed with email marketing. I've become obsessed over the last couple of years, and I was lucky enough to be on the call with Dave that he did for our Dog Co group just the other day. And the stuff that he was saying and laying out, I was just like, yes, yes, yes. Everybody needs to know this. Everybody should be building an email list.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We're going to have Angela Reinbacher here talking about Facebook ads and the incredible work she's done to grow her pet care company with Facebook ads. We're going to have Austin Tuck talking about monetizing shelter partnerships, which I think is phenomenal because you can essentially drive revenue streams from people anywhere in the world that you can populate into your local pet care business. It What I can guarantee is that people who come you will not only get in the room with other companies that can help you get further, but you will get tactical information you can implement. There's not a lot of fluff going on at this one. This one's going to be a heavy hitter.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm most excited about is that it is going to be a heavy hitter. And you can tell that from looking at the speaker lineup and everything. And that's what I'm here for. Let's go.
Let's go. LFG, let's do it.
Give us the link. Where can people go to see the lineup, see the speakers, and buy their tickets?
Yeah, 100%. So if you go to dogcosummit.com, we can put a link on the screen,
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
That is going to be where you can read more about the Joey Coleman workshop. You can read more about the speaker lineup. We have frequently asked questions up there. And then you also can go to purchase your ticket, whether you do digital or in person. If you come in person, you get a digital ticket just as part of your ticket purchase, or you can purchase just a digital ticket.
Yeah, yeah. I know it's hard for people to get away from their business, especially if they're in those first couple levels and they're still, working
Mhm.
out the kinks and starting to build their team. It can be hard to get away. So that digital ticket is going to be a great alternative for those people. How long do they get access to the recordings of the sessions and everything?
Yeah, 1 year. So the Joey
That's
Coleman
awesome.
digital ticket is a live stream. So you can watch it live time. You can watch it with your teams. If you're coming in person, you can send that link for your managers to watch or your teams to watch. So that'll
That's
be a live
incredible.
stream. I'm really excited because I was like, man, that's so cool. Because like, even if you can come in person, your managers would learn so much from that, and it just gets really expensive to bring multiple people. And that's no additional cost to you. So if you're coming to Joey Coleman, you just get the live stream. So Joey Coleman's live streamed, and then you'll have that link for a year. The summit recordings you'll get within two. So we weren't able to live stream the entire conference, but you'll get professional recordings of all of these speaker sessions for the full 2-day conference within 2 weeks of the conference, and you get that for a year.
That's amazing. That's
Oh,
amazing.
can I talk about one more bonus that we're currently? When are you
Yeah.
posting this video?
I can post it whenever. I was planning on posting
Okay.
it this afternoon, but I can wait.
Yes. Okay. No, no, no. Yeah, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry. So if you purchase either in person or digital before July 15th, one thing that we are offering to companies is you'll receive an implementation plan off of the summit with like key takeaways from the content for like tactical action for your business to drive results. And then you'll also receive a private webinar 2 weeks after the conference with me breaking down the strategies of, listen,
Ooh.
I'm really, because I want people to actually take something from this, like
Yeah.
let's not just do head knowledge. Let's actually drive change in your business. So if you buy your ticket before July 15th, you get access to those two things.
Heck yeah. I'm definitely posting this afternoon so everybody can get their tickets before July 15th. That is awesome.
Yeah, I hope it's helpful.
I highly encourage everybody to try to come in person. 'Cause I love Winston-Salem. It's such a cool city, and being there in September, what better time to be there?
North Carolina does the fall right. Like
Yes.
that is like the one season where I'm like, it's hard to beat elsewhere.
Yes, yes. And the venue that you picked for the conference is right downtown in walking distance to cool coffee shops, cool restaurants. I mean, it's right there next to the nice hotel. It's going to be amazing.
Yes, and we still have some rooms in our block. We have some rooms in a downtown block, and then plenty of rooms about a 8 to 10 minute drive from downtown. So there's still a lot of room, and would love to have y'all join us.
Nice, nice. I booked an Airbnb on the northern side of Winston-Salem because I'm going to bring Turkey up with me, and
I love
we're
it.
we're driving up a couple days early, going to do some hiking and just enjoy North Carolina.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, if anybody's coming up that time of year, do a little detour, go see Boone, the Blue Ridge, head to Winston. We're about an hour away. It's a good time.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, as we wrap up here, is there any other things that you want to mention or any other little bits of wisdom you can leave us with?
Man, I mean, I definitely think at some point we need to explore phases, 250, 300 up. So I'd love to do a second
Yes.
conversation.
Yes.
And no, I just appreciate you, Doug, appreciate all the work you're doing for our industry. And, I know how valuable this channel is to people. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm honored and grateful to be your friend and call you a friend and to be in the Dogco Mastermind. I mean, not to do like a full plug or anything, but I will. It's been game changing. You know what? We're 6 months into the year. My cohort started in January, and we've been hitting revenue goals that I didn't know if we could hit. And I've been working out issues with my team and all these other things thanks to your guidance. And we have our call every Thursday as a cohort, and then there's time every day for office hours where we can just come on and ask questions, and then I can text you when I have questions. It's amazing. It's truly amazing. When is your next mastermind opening for enrollment so people can go ahead and start thinking ahead?
Yeah. So I'll say this Dogco is going to be making some changes in the next few months. And if you are in
Ooh.
person at the conference, you'll be the first to know about them. So,
Okay. Okay.
let's let's just say that planning for maybe an end of the year, but please come to the conference and you'll be the first in the know.
Ooh, I love the suspense there. You're leaving us on a cliffhanger.
But I do my best.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up. Michelle, thank you so much. Everyone at home, check out her links in the description below. I'll link to the conference, I'll link to the Facebook group, I'll link to everything down in the description below. Thank you all for watching. Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button. And with that, I'm Doug the Dog Guy. This is Michelle Kline, and we are reminding you to stay positive.